Hi everybody. That of course was a famous passage from the Prelude to Georges Bizet's opera Carmen, and it's something that we find on most trumpet auditions. And it's always good when we're preparing for an audition to try and have a good idea about what is our function in the orchestra when we're playing this particular music. Now this one is interesting because, as some of you know already, you're playing unison. That's very important. You're not only playing unison with another trumpet player, but the two trumpeters are also playing unison with the entire cello section in the orchestra. And we just play differently when we play with one another than we do when we're playing by ourselves. So one of the big problems with practicing this excerpt for an audition is that we're always playing it by ourselves. And I can tell you from my own experience, it's so much easier to play this in a performance or in a rehearsal in the orchestra than it is to play it on an audition or to even record it and make a recording of it by yourself. And the reason is when we work together, we give each other mutual support. It's like we form a synergy when we're working together, and that's great. Now, FYI, this particular video is being recorded in the 11th month of the pandemic. So we performing musicians haven't been performing with one another. We haven't been playing with other people for a very, very long time. And it's been very difficult for many reasons. But the primary reason is that we make beautiful music together. Now, how does that work out in this excerpt? Well, when we're playing with one another, especially when we're playing in unison, we're thinking about several things. Obviously, pitch is important because if you've ever tried to play this with another trumpet player, and I strongly recommend that you do, you should be able to sound like one trumpet. That's a very high level of craftsmanship, but that's what you're aiming for. Even more important, try and play this with a cellist. Because when you do, you're going to understand what really cool things you can do with the quality of the sound in terms of blending your sound into the cello sound. And that's exactly what your function is here in the orchestra with Bizet's orchestration. He wants the intensity and maybe a little bit of the threat of the voice of the trumpet, you know, the focus in the sound that's not possible with the cello, to come into the cello sound and enhance it and make it more powerfully expressive than it can be on its own. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here, and it's very difficult to feel that without doing it. So I recommend that you find a cellist and play it in unison with them. It's great exercise to do that. Now when you do play in unison, it's not only pitch. One of the main things that you're dealing with is timbre. And it's difficult to blend the timbre of the trumpet with the cello. But it's also a really cool result when you get it. This is something that's very common in orchestration, great orchestration across the board. Ravel was a master at this. Strauss, you know, so many other composers use this technique of blending the sounds of the different instruments. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So if you're thinking about that in your imagination when you start out, well, it says forte. Yes, in the context, what does that mean? You're blending. You're blending with another trumpet player. If you're the first trumpet player, you're leading and consciously blending with the cellos. And that balance can only be achieved in the context of a performance. You see why this is difficult to do it by ourselves. Timbre. The trumpet has a very strong sound, very focused sound. Don't try and make it woofy. Don't try and sound like the cello. Take your sound and blend it into the cello sound. There's another big issue that comes up here. When I play this and it feels good to me, playing it as a solo, I use vibrato. It seems natural to use vibrato. It's an opera, you know, there's a lot of singing going on. When the cellists are playing, they're using vibrato. Should we use vibrato? Generally, no, because we want to allow the cellists to have that shimmering quality in the section. And when we add too much vibrato, we can disturb that. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. Again, that's a judgment call. But if I play it with vibrato, see, that draws attention to my sound. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. So this would be one of those instances where I recommend that you practice it with vibrato and then play it with absolutely no vibrato. Now, how can you be expressive when you're not using any vibrato? It's basically about the line. And you can hear this in a performance. You can feel it when everything is going together. Now, we have an advantage in the performance. The violins, the upper strings, are doing a kind of a furious tremolo. It's so exciting. And you feel the kind of the drama of the situation when you get to this point in the music. It goes right into your heart. We don't have that when we're playing it by ourselves. So again, a great thing to practice is putting yourself in your imagination in that performance situation. Hear it in your mind. Study great recordings and performances of this. And do your best to become someone who is enhancing the overall effect, not necessarily drawing attention to yourself. And when you play it that way in an audition, the committee will hear that you understand what your function is in the orchestra, and that's one of the most important things you're trying to get across. So I have some of these ideas, maybe that we don't talk about as much, have been helpful to you today. Please join me for a short lesson on this as we go forward, and I'll try and give you some things you can use to refine your skills, which is critical if you want to advance in an orchestra audition. Okay, have a great day, everybody, and enjoy.